Welcome to the On Purpose Investor Podcast, show number 78, our interview with Scott Jelinek. Welcome to the On Purpose Investor Podcast. My name is Eric Vogel. I'm a real estate investor, mastermind coach, husband to an amazing woman, and often my co-host, Tiffany, and father to two incredible boys. I'm on a mission to help you become a real estate investor and not only achieve seven-figure success like my wife and I did, but to do so with intention, direction, and clarity. If you want to transform your financial and personal goals, become the version of yourself you've always wanted, and reach your dream life ASAP, then you're in the right place. Thank you for deciding to hit that play button today. Now let's begin. Scott Jelinek is a successful entrepreneur and real estate investor with over 30 years of experience in the industry. His passion for entrepreneurship started at a young age, and he started his first business venture at just 15 years old. After serving in the Army, he turned to real estate and has since completed over 800 deals, establishing himself as a leader in the field. Scott's slow flip investment strategy has allowed him to own 158 houses and generate a steady monthly income without the typical landlord headaches. He is a creative investor who buys houses without money or credit and turns them into long-term investments. He has shared his knowledge and expertise through teaching seminars and classes, helping others achieve their financial goals through real estate investing. As a full-time real estate investor, Scott has gained extensive knowledge and experience in the industry, which he uses to coach and mentor other investors. He is passionate about helping others achieve success in this lucrative field and is on a mission to empower as many people as possible to set themselves free through real estate investing. Let's welcome to the show, Scott Jelinek. All right, welcome to the show, Scott. It's a pleasure to have you on here, and I look forward to our audience getting to know what you do, sir.
Thank you, Eric. I've been looking forward to this. How are you doing today?
I'm doing quite well, and I appreciate you joining us from the lovely Virginia Beach. Hopefully we don't have any of those hurricane scares this year, or y'all have very unique, like hurricane blizzard type things that happen sometimes.
We actually, to tell you, I know this is off topic, but we actually had a tornado this past year, and it was right behind my house. It was over the bay. We saw it. And out of disbelief is that really? And it was a tornado and took down houses right on the other side of the water.
Just to tell you, I was actually living on Naval Base Little Creek when that tornado happened. And we had to respond to some of that in a unique way. We went out there and tried to bring water and stuff and drove through that neighborhood that got epicentered.
Yeah, that's right across the water from me.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. We were so close, Scott. We should have had breakfast.
Yeah. We were right there.
So I would love for our guests to get to know you a little bit. Tell us a little bit about your background, how long you've been doing what you do, and what do you do?
You know, it's hard to say this without sounding really old, but this year, 2024, marks 30 years since I've been buying houses. And there's no way to say that without sounding really old. I can't even, as the words come out of my mouth, I'm like, man, I'm old. 30 years, 1994, I bought my very first house. And I started, never with the intention, to give you a long answer to your question, never had the intention of doing real estate. I mowed lawns back then. And, this is a long time ago, but there used to be a thing that was called non-qualifying assumptions. You probably never even heard of them because they did away with them in 87 for VA and in 89 for FHA. And it meant that anybody can take over the mortgage at any time within the 30 years with no credit check, no job check, as long as the seller made an agreement with you. So you'd pay out the seller's equity. So this first house I bought was $5,000 down. It was a townhouse in Virginia Beach and $675 a month. And I just bought it to live in with no thought of real estate other than better to own than to rent. Right. And so that was my plan. And then about 2-3 weeks after I bought it, a house came up for sale on the block, and they're townhouses, mind you, so they're all the same. And this one had a white sign in front that said $2,000 down, take over payments. And I got pissed. And I got pissed because I felt like I got ripped off. Even though I didn't even know the price, I didn't know the value, I didn't know equity, I didn't know repairs, I didn't know anything. All I knew was 5,000 down, and this one was 2,000 down. And so I was mad, and I decided, well, let me buy that one too. And that'll, cost average me out to 3,500 each. Mm-hmm. And so I bought the second one, and I rented it out for $675 a month, which was pretty stupid because that's the same amount as my mortgage payment. But that's what started me thinking real estate, because every month they would make the payment to me, I would pay the mortgage company, and it kept sticking with me that I borrowed the money, they're paying it off. I borrowed it, they're paying it off. Mm-hmm. And I became obsessed just with buying as many as I can, back then, and non-qualifying assumptions was all I would look at. And I've never looked back ever since then.
Yeah. And the real estate group that I'm a part of, we have a mortgage lender there that is in his 60s or 50s. And at every meeting or so, it comes up. He's like, man, I just wish those NQMs were still a thing. And
Yeah.
it's like, y'all don't even know how crazy it was back then. It was crazier even than the 2008, fog a mirror, get a house mortgage like that. So,
Yeah, because you didn't have to fog a mirror back then. You just had to make a
right.
deal with the seller.
Yeah.
And the seller could owner finance their equity if they want. Sometimes they had no equity. It was just come in and do a closing. The mortgage,
Right.
it was just like a sub two. Everybody knows sub two now, right?
Mhm.
It was just like a sub two, except the bank blessed it. The bank changed the mortgage coupon book into your name, started mailing you. Everything was in your name. It was on your credit report now, even though you didn't qualify. So it was just like a sub two, only it was blessed by the bank.
Yeah, that's a dangerous field, and definitely something you could talk for days and days and days on, is that sub two and the little gray area that exists with it. Well, it's a pretty
Yep.
big gray area, and really figuring out how to do it the right way and legally bound. So you have a book, Scott, The Art of the Slow Flip, and I am absolutely, enthralled with hearing about your take on the slow flip. It's been around for ages and ages, probably since the beginning of real estate investing, may even go all the way back to the richest man in Babylon. Who knows? But you have taken something that has existed forever and put it in a way where people can understand the process and start implementing that process. Can you tell us a little bit about the art of the slow flip?
Yeah. So I got, not to get into the whole story, but I bought a lot of houses starting in 1994 all the way up to 2007. And I got crushed by the bust. And I had 84 houses at the time of the bust, and I had 84 mortgages, and I got crushed. And then as we were dusting ourselves off, I was trying to figure out, some people were still doing well and some people weren't. So I was like, well, what was the difference? And one of the things that was 100% across the board difference was the guys who were crushing it at that time all owned everything free and clear. And I was a leverage guy. So I was like, they're idiots. Why would they do that? They're idiots. They can make so much more money if, right? And you could.
Mm-hmm.
But at that time now, houses came to the lowest prices they ever were, talking about 2009, 10, 11.
Yep.
And yet banks wouldn't finance anybody. You couldn't do, there was very few resources out there you couldn't sell. So it was a challenging time.
Yeah.
But yet the prices were so good. I was like, well, we need to buy them, but how can we fund them? We don't, our credit shot now. We don't have, mortgages aren't lending. And so I started working on private lenders. But every time I would talk to a lender on a house, they want to do 30 years. And it always struck with me. I'm like, I buy a car for 30 grand, 50 grand, 100 grand, and they give you a 5-year loan. But I buy a house for the same amount of money and they want to give me a 30-year loan. And so I was twisting and playing with the numbers until I came up with, I want to be a free and clear guy now, but I don't have the money to pay cash for them, right? And so I started buying on what we call the slow flip, where we would buy them with private money on 5-year mortgages. 5 years, and not a balloon in 5 years, 5 years amortized, and then it's paid off. But simultaneously, I would sell that property as is, without doing any work, without cleaning it up, without painting it, without mowing the lawn, sell it immediately on a 30-year mortgage. So I typically wouldn't make any money. I wouldn't lose, but I would be about break even, maybe make a little for the first 5 years. But then after 5 years, it was pure cash flow for the duration. It was free and clear. And so now I have 178 of them. 109 of them are already free and clear. I have, every month there's another 1 or 2 or 3 get paid off because from wherever that 5 years started. And I absolutely love it because the model changed from me to, the leverage and the hamster wheel to just freedom. And that's what I teach people. I'm like, listen, if you want Lamborghinis and yachts, this is not for you, right? I try and tell you, I said, I'm not teaching you how to get rich. I'm teaching you how to be free, how to live your ideal life, be able to wake up in the morning and do whatever you want, whenever you want, and know you're not going out and buying a Lamborghini. Although I have some people that have a lot of houses and they can do whatever they want, but the masses typically need $10,000, $20,000 a month and they can be free. And we teach people to get there in 5 to 7 years. And some people are like, I don't want to wait 5 to 7 years. I want to do this in 3 months. I'm like, well, then this is not for you. This is a slow flip.
Right. The whole investing space, real estate space in general, going back to like Carlton Sheets.
He was my first course.
Sailing on the boat with the hot babes, and he's on a yacht and all that, selling this hope of freedom and hope of peace. And now we're into the new age of Carlton Sheets with the Pace Morby of make $10,000 a day for 30 days and, leave your job and do all this. While that is really cool and sexy and sounds great, it's a job is what they're really creating. And it will change. That job will change with the tides, the rising and falling tides of the real estate. Some things will work in some markets, some will not. So you have to find something that's going to sustain in any market, which the slow flip sounds like it does. because you have the freedom and flexibility of doing these owner carry essentially to seller finance individuals to work with them. And you have a way of paying it off in 5 years. And, I'm sure you get into that in your book. But, circling back to my main statement is nothing in real estate is going to be super quick and provide generational wealth and a lifelong spending time of that freedom until you invest a lot in it. And 5 to 7 years is absolutely so quick when you really think about it.
There's guys that legitimately make that bazillion dollars in their first 3 months, right? But for every one that actually does, there's probably 10,000 of them that started it because they saw what he did, and then they don't make it. When you do the harder path, pretty much everybody can make it. It's just harder. It takes more time and it's harder, but it's safe, secure, and will get you there. And, there's a saying I always love, and it's if you do what's easy, life will be hard. And if you do what's hard, life will be easy. And I always, every time someone's like, oh, there's another way, I said, you can do that. But now you're going to have this problem ongoing for the rest of your life, or a possible problem looming out there. Or you can just do what's hard for a short amount of time and be free for the rest of your life. And that's it. I'm all about freedom, because and most people don't really appreciate this until you've been crushed. But I had I was living a fantastic life up in 2004, 5, 6. I was doing really, really well. And all of a sudden, like that, everything went away. And the whole business, I went to work for a whole year, did nothing. I went to work and just hung out in the office. There was nothing, that could be done. And it's eye-opening to say, I'm not doing that again. I'm not going through that again. So when we revamped, there's obviously other ways to make money. And I still wholesale. I'm always going to wholesale because I love it. But I still do other things. But slow flips are secure foundation for your freedom. That's it. That's the reason I love them, is because regardless, everybody talks about what's going to happen in the market. I said, I don't care. Market gets crushed, I buy more houses. Market goes through the roof, I buy more houses. Either way, I don't care. And if I was in my old position where I was all leveraged, I would be like, oh my God, what's going to happen? How am I going to get, what if this happens? How am I going to survive? And now I just don't care.
So I want to break it down just a little bit on, you say you buy it with private money. So for our listeners, private money are individuals that have what I call lazy money. Maybe it's your high income earners or your older folks that have retirement accounts. These are not people that are in the industry. These are not people that know real estate very well. They may have owned a couple of houses in their life, but they lend at a typically lower rate than what your hard money lenders will lend at. So,
Eric, I got to cut you off for 1 second and just tell you, you are probably the first person who ever described a private money lender the exact same way I do. It's interesting because I hear so many people say what a private money lender is. And I'm like, I'll usually be like, let me stop you. That's not what I consider a private money lender. Yeah. I consider a private money lender, and I describe it exactly as you just did, and not companies that say I do private money. I'm like, that's not a private lender. For me, a private lender is a person that has money that I cultivated to be a lender. And that's
Absolutely.
It. And you're like the first person who ever had the same mindset as what a private lender is to me. Because I would say, well, my definition is this, and yours was exactly the same.
Well, I won't take all the credit. I educate nonstop. I educate continuously. I'm always getting into circles that know more than me. And I used to think private money and hard money were basically the same thing. And they are absolutely not. If you can cultivate relationships and steward people's money in a professional and responsible way, they will trust you to invest for them. And that's what you do with private money lenders. You are the steward of their investments. And you show them how safe it can be through your experience. But you might say, well, I'm trying to get into this for the first time. Listen, your first deal you're ever going to do, I'm pretty sure you're going to have to go with hard money. And you're going to have to figure it out that way. Show you know what you're doing. Show you can do the returns. Show that you have the experience for the first few. And then start telling those people in your circles, I know what I'm doing. I can give you a better return than CDs and then your savings account, and better than your IRA. I can give you better returns than that. If you want to do a low offer, we can take you and the neighbor across the street and a couple of friends of yours, and we can pull the money and we can all join in on the same deal. That way you're all lower risk. But, those are different things that you absolutely need to go study and figure out. Getting into the SEC types of things. Are you syndicating? You got to figure that stuff out. So I'm a layman on this. Do not take any financial advice from me. But just know that there are so many ways to cultivate relationships with people that have money. I'm at a meetup every one Thursday a month, every month, been going for almost 7 years. I've never missed a meeting. And when I go, we usually pass around note cards and we write on them, how much lazy money do you have? And we come out and figure out that, lazy money is just money in savings, money in your retirement account, money that's not earning actively outside of the stock market. So in that room is usually 30 to 40 folks, mostly gray haired, but I say that in the way of folks that are retired. Most of the time, I used to be the youngest person in the room, but not anymore. There's younger folks coming in now. But there would be somewhere between 15 and $20 million in a room of about 40 people. And that's just mind blowing because before I started going into these spaces, I had no idea that money was there.
Nobody.
I always thought
crazy. Everybody's like, I don't know anybody with money. I say, oh yeah, you do. It's there.
Absolutely.
You just don't know.
That's right. So figuring out how to cultivate those relationships and steer conversations on getting people to be a private lender for you and not a hard money lender for you. It's something that I'm still working on. I'm 6.5 years into the game and I'm still trying to figure out how to cultivate those relationships. And it all starts with showing your experience and gaining trust. Now, that doesn't come through someone that's trying to make $10,000 a month when they first get started. That comes from someone that's willing to play the long game and willing to put in the work to show that they're ready to do it.
Yep. So we teach, that's one of the things I train people on is how to raise private money because it's kind of essential for our business model. The reason our opportunity exists is because the seller needs cash and the buyer needs financing, right? And so we get in the middle, we provide the seller with cash, we provide the buyer with financing. If we didn't have the private money, or if you didn't have millions of dollars of your own money, you wouldn't be able to get in the middle. And so that's why it's such a key component of the slow flip is the ability to raise private money. So we can pay the seller their cash and give the buyer the financing, and we stay right in the middle and make the spread. And that's why I love it. We operate like a bank. So I have 178 houses right now, and I don't have any employees. I don't have any repairs. I don't get any phone calls. We just process payments. We are just like a bank. That's it.
So I want to get into that a little bit, how different this is from your typical landlord real estate investor. So he buys the home for cash and you buy it on a 5-year term.
Yeah. So I'm going to tell you some numbers. So,
okay.
And you're in Atlanta, so you have some lower dollar areas out there. We have a lot in my area, but they've gone up over these last few months, but we also buy out west now. So I'm prefacing that to tell you, when I say these numbers, a lot of times, especially if you have a broad audience, people listen, the first thing they say is, that's not possible. Houses don't exist at that price range. You can't do it. And I always tell them, I said, well, don't argue, just Google. I said, you can just Google and there's thousands and thousands of them every day available. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to tell you my base numbers. And I had to say that in advance because otherwise, if I don't say that in advance, people would be like, that doesn't exist and hang and shut this off right away. Right.
Right.
Pick enough numbers. Our typical base numbers for a slow flip is to buy houses at $30,000 or less. So when I say that, people are like, 30,000, they don't exist. Yes, they do. And again, that might not be in your state. If you live, there's certain states where you can't buy a parking space for $30,000, right? Mm-hmm. So that wouldn't be where you invest. But the model we do, you can do it remotely. I'm in several states and I've never seen these houses. So we buy them at $30,000. We borrow private money at 12% interest. So that we pay a high interest rate and that we do that. Mm-hmm. So we have abundant money, right?
Yeah.
12% interest amortized for 60 months makes your payment $667.33. So you have 60 payments of $667.33. We turn around and sell them immediately without ever even seeing them, depending on the area, anywhere from $69,000 to $89,000 with owner financing, with typically anywhere from $3,000 to $5,000 down and $875 a month. So on that $875 a month, we really don't make any money because we have $667 plus we're paying our taxes and our insurance.
Yeah.
And so we don't make any money, but it's for 5 years and then we're free and clear. As opposed to doing this, what I call the great rental myth where, people try and make a little spread and it's forever for 30 years, right? And they generally never get ahead on that. And so for your first 5 years, and I got people in my program, my number one guy has 129 already. He's only been with me five years and a month now. So he's got 129 of them already. He'll beat me this year because he's still buying aggressively. He's only 30 years old.
Right.
I'm kind of not buying very aggressively anymore. I just buy when opportunity presents itself, but he's like actively buying aggressively. It's amazing the wealth someone can amass. Like he's going to be in multi-millions of dollars a year. In 5 years from now, he'll be at multi-millions of dollars a year without getting up and going to work. So that's it, just from processing these payments. There's no maintenance, there's no repairs. We are just operating as a bank. And I love that because I used to be a landlord. I had 84 houses and I was strictly landlord. And it's a full-time repairs, maintenance, non-payers, court, all this stuff, and air conditioner stolen, pipes leaking, and we don't do any of that anymore. Now I just go to my P.O. box, most of it comes online, and process payments.
Right. So I want to clarify something for our listeners. You say you don't deal with landlording things. You don't deal with repairs and maintenance
Right.
and doing the lawn and all that stuff. You don't deal with that. And
No,
that's
no.
because your buyers are buying the property from you. You still owe your $667 a month towards your 5-year 12% interest note, but they are now paying you let's say $90,000 over 30 years. And after 5
Yeah.
years, you have paid off your lenders. You now get that $900 or so a month straight to you, minus a couple of things on operating expenses and whatnot. But you don't have to deal with how they use the property. They
Right.
can use the property however they want to. They can turn it into a rental. They can live in it. They can do whatever they want. Now, I want to ask you some questions about what else can they do with the property? What happens if they sell it? What happens if you have to foreclose? Can you go down those two holes?
Yep. So they do sell, and it's awesome when they do. A lot of times, some of the things people don't like about slow flips, and I'll tell you, one of them is they're afraid, well, what if they all buy them? I'm going to not have my houses anymore. And that's a legitimate concern, except that I'm like, if they buy them, we celebrate because now you got 90 grand, go buy 3 more, right? It's not I'm going to lose my house. I'm like, no, you're going to triple or double or triple the amount of houses you have because you're going to go buy more and pay for them. So a significant portion of our sales are to investors. And this is interesting because most of the time people are like, well, why would an investor buy at your prices? It doesn't make any sense, right? And I'll tell you why they do. They buy for 2 reasons. One is most investors, I refer to this guy as 2005 Scott, right? Most investors are like 2005 Scott. Well, they'll buy anything they can if they can get financing on it and make a small spread, $200, $300 a month. And so they do. They give me $3 grand down and then they fix it up, they rent it, and they make about $300 a month in cash flow, which is what they've been trained to do, right? We also have a significant portion of investors. I sold 38 last month to one investor, and he does Section 8 rentals. So he's paying me a small amount, but he's getting like $1,300 a month from Section 8. So yes, he has to fix them up, and yes, he has to deal with the inspections. That's a whole nother business. My mindset is always, I want everybody involved to make money, right? If everybody makes money, they want more and they keep wanting more. The second thing you ask is, how would they go about selling it? They have all the benefits and burdens of ownership. So they can list it, they can rent it out, they can do whatever they want. I always tell them, within the limit of the law, you can do whatever you want with the property as long as the law allows. You don't have to ask me. As long as the law says it's okay for you to do it, you can do it. And we strictly operate just like a bank. They process payments.
Right. And when they sell it, you pay off your underlying and you keep the spread.
Correct.
Right. Now, here's a tax question for you. Do you pay gains on that, but what you paid for it to what you sold it to them for?
When you sell it, yes, absolutely.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay.
Now you have the option at that time if you wanted to 1031 it. I don't. I used to, but it's got complicated because I want to keep at the same price range houses. And my intermediary was telling me, no, you had to go to step up. And I didn't want to get higher dollar houses.
You have to do the step up basis and all that.
I said, no, I don't want to do that. The cash flow didn't make sense. I would save on the taxes, but now I'm going to make less cash flow. So I didn't want to do that.
All right. So walk us through what happens when one of your buyers stops paying you.
That is a great question. So, and it happens, obviously, no matter how great you screen, even with rentals, everybody's like, oh, you didn't screen good enough. I mean, it doesn't matter how good you screen. Every person with bad credit had good credit before they stopped paying. Every person with a criminal record had a clean record before they got caught, right? So everybody's like, oh, well, you didn't screen good enough. We don't screen at all, mind you. We do first come, first serve. Even as a conventional landlord, if you screen, you're still going to have evictions. It happens. We only invest in states, and I'll tell you the states we're in. We only invest in states that are landlord friendly, and meaning if and when somebody defaults, because we don't record, this is done through an agreement for deed, a land contract. They call them different things in different states. The eviction process is the same as a defaulted tenant.
Okay.
So there is no foreclosure, there is no auction, there is no drawn out process. Now, some of the states have it where if they have 20% equity from their purchase price, now you have to foreclose. And I'm okay with that because in order to get 20% equity, that means they paid for about 12 years. If they paid for 12 years, I'd go through the process.
Yeah.
Not the end of the world, but most states we're in, it's just a regular eviction as if they were a defaulted tenant.
Okay. Now, do you ever run into right of redemption or anything like that, or do you stay out of those states?
Yeah, no, we don't have any of them. This is a regular eviction, no different than if a tenant defaulted. There is no right of redemption because it's not recorded, so it's not an actual foreclosure.
All right. So tell us the states that you are actively investing in, if you want to share that secret.
No, absolutely. So I love Virginia. So I'm in Virginia, and that's where the bulk of my properties are. Out of my 178, I think I probably have 110 or 115 are in Virginia. Yeah. And I would only buy in Virginia if they were available for me, but they're harder and harder to find them since our values went up so much.
Right.
We buy a lot in Missouri. Missouri is huge. We buy a lot in Missouri. We have some in Illinois, and everyone hates Illinois because they're like, oh, Illinois is so hard to, and Illinois is one of those states that is not easy. If they get 20% equity, you have to foreclose in Illinois. Plus, Illinois makes you take 60 days before you can even file to evict on a land contract. But we work all that in. On the Illinois side of St. Louis, we get nicer houses for lower money and higher rents. So we take that, with what it is. Indiana's another one that there's unbelievable. When I say these prices, it's amazing. We buy houses 17 grand sometimes. And I look at them like, how is this? The floors are hardwood and shining. The cabinets are beautiful. Everything's beautiful. How is this 17 grand and brings in $900 a month? I'm like, how does this make sense? Alabama has a bunch. I don't buy in Alabama right now, but a lot of my students do. And Alabama's another one where Alabama, you actually do have to foreclose, but they do it on a process that is so quick. It's like a 6-week process. So it's not much different than doing an eviction. Ohio, there's a lot in Ohio. Again, Ohio, I base it county by county because they have actually different laws there based on where you are in Ohio. So I'm not personally in Ohio, but a lot of my students are. But I always tell them, I said, you got to look at each individual municipality in Ohio. That's probably the bulk of the states I can think of. I have some people doing North Carolina. I have some people doing Tennessee, some people doing Kentucky, but I don't know much of their rules in those areas.
Gotcha. So there's just so much gold in everything that you've shared today so far. So if you want to learn even more into the depths of the slope flip and what Scott's program teaches, I highly encourage you to go grab that book as soon as possible. Now, Scott, you said our listeners could have a free gift today. Is that right?
I was telling you, if everybody goes to slowflip.com, slowflip.com, you can get a free copy of the book. And it'll be sent out to you. I held nothing back. So like sometimes people, I read a lot of books myself. I read books constantly. And sometimes you read them and you can see it's just like a long infomercial. This is not. There is nothing held back in the book from start to finish, from finding them to raising private money, to filling them, to how you handle every part of it. I literally put every part of it in the book. So there is nothing held back in there.
Absolutely. Thank you for that for our listeners. So listeners, do not hesitate. Go to theslowflip.com or slowflip.com.
Slowflip.com, slowflip.com.
All right. And go grab your copy. And there's another book that you have. I want to briefly talk about that. It is the book on how work just gets in the way of making money. Can you tell us a little bit about that book?
Yeah. So that was my first book, and Work Just Gets in the Way of Making Money is about actually slow flips are in there, and it was a chapter. So in Work Just Gets in the Way of Making Money, I taught on everything as far as marketing, wholesaling, rehabs, rentals, and slow flips, and raising private money is in there as well. But what happened is when I put out that book, and that was in 2016, it did really, really well, and everybody loved it, but everybody loved the slow flip chapter. Tell me more about that, more about that, more about that. And so that's when I started working and training specifically on slow flips, because it was incredible to me how much everybody read the whole thing, and then they were just harping on, we want to learn more about slow flips. So the reason I called it Work Just Gets in the Way of Making Money, Eric, I wanted to share that with you, is it was never meant to imply that this doesn't take work. As you know, you do it. It takes work. Even what I'm doing just as the bank, it still takes work. The reason I called it that is because so many times people would come up to me or can you teach me how to do this? Can I, show me what you're doing so I can do it? And then as I would start to tell them or share with them how to do and live the life we live and how to do what we do, I would get some variation of, well, that's easy for you. You don't have a job, or I can't do it because I'm too busy at work. And I'm like, do you hear what you're saying? You're too busy at work to make money. And they're like, yeah, but when am I going to do it? I'm like, so you're working all the time, which people typically go to work for money, right? You're too busy at work that you can't make any money. And I'm like, just hear your own words. And I said, I'm going to write a book and I'm going to call it Work Just Gets in the Way of Making Money. And that's how we came up with that name there.
Yeah, no, it's so true. I often say people get in their own way from doing anything that is lifelong rewarding. People get stuck in the rat race. People get stuck in the land of consumerism. Got to have this next best thing. I preach on the art of delayed gratification a lot, especially how you say your program could take 5 to 7 years and then you're free. People don't often want to wait 5 to 7 years. But I often challenge my students and my listeners to think back to where they were 5 years ago. They were at a spot 5 years ago somewhere. They were doing something. And whether they knew it or not, they were writing a check that day, immediately, like just right there in that moment. They were writing a check that day that they would cash 5 years later. And people don't realize that every day they're writing a check that they're going to cash 5 years later. And when you cash that check, do you want it to be for $0 and leave you right where you are? Do you want to have an abundant amount of money in that check that you're cashing later? thing is, you have to wait those 5 years to cash it. And if you held onto a check for $1 million and knew that you couldn't cash it for 5 years, how tightly would you hold that check to you? And how fondly would you hold on to it and what you had to do to cash it? I bet you would do everything you had to do to cash that check. Yep. And people often don't realize that their daily action, everything they do within one given day, is going to be rewarded in 5 years. And that's what I try to harp on to people, is that just get them in their body for just a second, because people are so wrapped up in TV and consumerism and work and the news and the media and social media. They're just so enveloped in it that they're not thinking about where they can be.
Yep. So Eric, I have a group called the Freedom Accelerator Program, and we do a meeting every single week. And every week I end it saying, and this is why your brain is exactly the same place as mine. Every week I end it by saying, do something today your future self will thank you for. And I tell them all the time, I said, you'll always be thinking something today that in the future, you're going to look back and thank yourself that you did it. And it's exactly what you just said. It's exactly, your mindset is exactly on the same page as the way I think.
Well, wonderful. Well, maybe I can drop in on one of your calls. I'd love to sit in and see what y'all are doing and maybe come join your circle. Scott, I want to thank you so much for taking time today. I know you could have been on anybody else's podcast today, and I'm thankful that you chose the On Purpose Investor podcast. Y'all, if you want to get in touch with Scott, go visit slowflip.com. If you want to follow him on Instagram, we have his handle right here on the screen. If you're watching on YouTube, Scott_Jelinek. And are there any other ways that people can get in touch with you?
I'm everywhere. And so I always tell people, I say that I don't have the most common name in the world. So I'm like, if you just type in Scott Jelinek in pretty much any social, you'll find me.
Okay. And to spell Jelinek, Jelinek.
Thanks,
right.
Eric. Had a great time.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much. And I look forward to seeing you next time I'm on Virginia Beach.
Yeah, by all means, look me up when you're here.
Will do. We are immensely grateful for you joining us today. If you haven't already done so, we invite you to subscribe to our show. We understand that many of you tune in regularly, but perhaps haven't had the chance to hit that subscribe button yet. Don't worry, it's effortless. It takes about 3 seconds to follow or subscribe on your platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're enjoying the show. Your support is invaluable to us and has played a crucial role in the tremendous growth of our podcast. We sincerely appreciate your assistance in any way, shape, or form. Together, we can launch this podcast to even greater heights.